What's up, everybody? I'm David Hain, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 38 of the A to D from Addict to Disciple podcast. I'd like to give a big shout out to our new listeners from Israel. Thanks for listening. That brings our total listenership up to 35 countries. If you'd like one-on-one counseling, or if you want to start or join an online group using the From A to D curriculum and podcasts, go to my website, www.fromatod.org, and click on the contact page, or leave me a message on Anchor. Today's episode is an interview with my good friend, Noah Kaye, the founder of Integer Network. Check out the episode note for his contact details. We'll get into this episode entitled Authenticity in Addiction when we come back. Well, thanks for joining me today, Noah. It's good to have you here. And I guess the best way to start is if you want to tell us a little bit about Integer Network and what authenticity means to you and your organization.
Sure, Dave. So delighted to be with you, man. Thanks for giving me this chance. So leading Integer Network started about 3 years ago, and Integer is a convergence of my calling, passion, gifts, skills, and experiences, where I realized after almost 2 decades of work in churches and religious organizations that, man, we are really lacking the safety to just be who we already are. And so I have just been long passionate about seeing people face themselves, know themselves, be healthy on the inside, do the soul work, but just truly bring their authentic self into their communities, their families, their relationships. And so I had 3 things, Dave, that I really valued as I look back over the landscape of my journey. 1, authenticity, to people to just be stinking real. 2, wholeness of heart, just for people to be caring about the condition of their heart, their soul, being alive on the inside. Because I just think healthy people lead healthy things. Healthy husbands cultivate healthy marriages, and on it goes. And so wholeness of heart. And then 3rd, in all my years of leadership, the one thing that seems to make the biggest difference is the intentional coaching, one-to-one, long-term relational journey with people.
As I listen to those things, I'm hearing sort of just the opposite of the journey of an addict. So how would you introduce authenticity or explain authenticity to someone caught in the snare of addiction?
Okay, yeah, good question. So this whole word authenticity is actually loaded with both beauty and mystery. It's, yes, at the core of what we dream of at Integer and how I try to live my life. But there is a ton of risk and suspicion attached to this idea of authenticity. We have people longing to be truly known, naked, seen for who they are as they are, and then making choices that separate or divide us, which call shame, and promote hiding, make us hide from each other. So I find authenticity just all over the creation story and the beginning kind of foundations of human nature. When we screw up and mess up and miss the mark, our human nature, because of shame, is to hide. But true connection, true meaning, true life comes when we're known, seen, in our nakedness, in our brokenness. That's where true connection happens, both with God and with others. And so, yeah, I just want to say, as we talk about addicts and how authenticity relates, kind of some of my favorite definitions of it are our little mantra at Integer is to be brave enough to be real. That's what authenticity is, being brave enough to be real. Or another way of saying it might be knowing and sharing the real us. And kind of an expanded definition, Dave, that we work with is authenticity is awareness of our feelings and needs and the courage to offer them for the sake of connection with others. The key words there being awareness, courage, and connection, because The whole point of this authenticity stuff and vulnerability stuff and revealing the truth of who we are is so we can have meaningful connection with each other. And so I'm sure we're going to get into how it relates to addicts specifically, and I do have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, and that's a powerful way of looking at it, because that yearning is inside the addicts, but it's that fear of betrayal, fear of broken trust,
Yeah.
fear of all those other things that that keeps it sort of repressed
Yeah.
and numbed in their addiction.
Yeah. And when I think, Dave, about authenticity, what is it to an addict? Like how authenticity and an addicted person collide. I think of authenticity and addicts kind of as a polarity of extremes. And by the way, I have experience with this. I have a dear friend who spent a decade incarcerated and fought addiction. And I've walked in a very personal way with people. But when I think of addicts and authenticity, I see a polarity of extremes on a continuum from total hiding all the way over to wide open. I don't give a flip what you think.
Yeah.
And those two strong examples of how authenticity or the lack thereof show up in the life of an addict. They range the gamut from have a complete private life I want no one to know about to it's all out there, I'm caught and I don't care. And they spend years feeding an addiction and telling themselves they don't give a rip about their family or anybody else. So there is a lot to learn. I've said a few times that addicts have a lot to teach us about authenticity, actually, in those two extremes.
Yeah. So, sort of looking at an addict's early life, do you feel that a lack of authenticity or the absence of authenticity in their home, in their childhood, could be one of
Mm.
those wounds that leads to experimentation and addiction?
Yeah, such a good question. I absolutely do. But I would say, Dave, that it is just generalized hurt, pain, hiding. So pain not noticed. So often, at least from my limited experience, and you know this way more than I do, but often those that end up addicted have a story where their formative influencers, their formative relationships as a child, um, there was pain attached, there was neglect, rejection, hurt. Um, and so the failure to be loved as they were forced them to medicate pain that stayed hidden. And frankly, I think a lot of times addicts, well, I think it's a generalization, but to say that not always, but many times they do come from um, stories that are riddled with pain and brokenness that usually, well, mom and dad probably had it really hard too. And so, yes and amen. I do think there is a significant connection to the lack of authenticity, but really just a lack of safety in their formative years, in their foundational years. I like to say that the foundation of the house of a human is built in the first 10 to 12 years. You can adjust windows and put some new flooring here and there, but the foundation of identity and how one gives and receives love is formed in those early important formative years and is often highly influenced by whether they feel safe to be loved as they are. And when they're not, they go searching for it, as you well know.
Yeah. And I like you said several times, as they are or who they really are. And, I look at a lack of being loved for who you are, planting those early seeds of I need to pretend to be what I know I'm not so I can feel love.
Yes.
And that just fuels the deception and minimizing and rationalizing when I found something else to numb my pain of not being loved. So how do you talk to the
Mm.
families of addicts who are hurt by the behaviors that they're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I am not a pro on this by any stretch of imagination, but when I think about that challenge for families, what comes to my mind is that their primary task probably ought to be to maintain a sense of stability because the addict can't. In other words, let me say it using the same analogy I used earlier. Don't ride the addict's wave of hiding and honesty. Stay consistent in truth. In other words, the addict is going to ride this wave of I'm in, I'm out. I'm hiding, I'm revealing. I'm open, I'm ashamed. And there's this instability, this ebb and flow of authenticity, if I can say it that way. And I really think a challenge for families that want to walk in a healthy way with their addicted family member is to maintain stability of authenticity. Don't be drawn into the left or the right, but consistent in truth. And at the same time, obviously, families have to self-differentiate from the addict. I am not them. This is their journey. This is their choice. And you have to create some type of space in order to remain healthy. Mom of the addict, you are not the addict. You are mom. And your role is to journey faithfully as mom, maintaining some sense of stability when they're leaning to the left, leaning to the right, hiding, coming out. And so the word stability really comes to my mind, Dave, when I think about the role that families play in this journey.
Yeah, that's a good one. And I heard in what you said, I didn't hear you use the word embrace, but it's almost working with the family of the addicts to say you need to be able to embrace those moments when the authenticity is there 100% and not judge those moments when you feel the tide going out and the deception coming back.
Well, that's exactly right. And also to make sure that your sense of self is not tied totally into your addicted family member. It's very easy to, especially depending on what relationship you're in, to think, well, this is a reflection on me. This is my fault. I did this wrong. I don't think that brings healing to an addict necessarily. For another person to then blame themselves for your choices, it gets them off the hook more than it helps them face the truth of their state. And so, yeah.
So and you've got a group of coaches around the world who are part of the Integer Network. What would you say to them as their leader, as an early way to establish authenticity with someone just starting recovery and says, "Hey, I'm still addicted, but I want to get clean. I want to get right.
Yeah.
And that's why I came to you to coach me."
Good question. There's a quote by Brene Brown, who's a leading voice on shame research and issues of vulnerability and authenticity. And she says this, she says, authenticity is the daily practice of letting go of who we think we're supposed to be and embracing who we are. I would say to someone starting the journey of recovery that the only way to get to the other side of shame is through it. You can't skip shame. You can't. Shame is a natural consequence of our poor choices. That's human. And you can't delete it or skip it or sidestep it. The only way to get to the other side of shame, embarrassment, regret, pain is through it. And so I would say to someone starting the journey, take off the mask, come out of hiding, face the shame, and walk straight into it.
Yeah, that's a huge word there. And that's something that is not just a I'm starting recovery thing, but that's even long term. That shame can keep coming back as new people hear about it, or as you're introduced to people and they heard about you before they met you.
Yeah.
And you can see their eyeballs rolling, and you see that sort of thing. So how can authenticity strengthen long-term recovery? How can it become part of a lifestyle?
I think addicts, in a really counterintuitive way, have a gift of saying, I've been in the pit. You've seen me at my worst. You can certainly have this mess now. So I think to think long term for addicts, they can be some of the leading voices in what it is to be authentic, to be known, to be vulnerable, to bear their business, to share their secrets, to reveal their shame. They could actually, I have been in rooms full of addicts at different addiction ministries and I left feeling deeply inspired because ain't nobody more real than someone that's been in the pit. And so I actually think, Dave, and I'm speaking now from my gut, like prophetically, addicts have a corner on the authenticity market and a gift to inspire the rest of us, quote unquote, normal folks to come out of hiding.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the A to D from Addict to Disciple podcast. If you'd like to support our work with people caught in the snare of addiction, homelessness, or incarceration, please click on the support link in this episode's description. Your donation of any amount could change a life. Tune in Monday for our next episode, and as always, stay safe and stay strong.